is Halo, Human Weakness by Karen Travis. Narrated by me, Miss Precursor. All rights to the Halo Evolution short story compilation and Halo Human Weakness belong to the prospective authors and publishers. This is a not-for-profit, creative endeavor done by a Halo fan for Halo fans. I hope you enjoy. Dr. Halsey, why am I me? My mind is a clone of your brain, but I know I'm not you. So what exactly is self? Is it just the cumulative effect of differences in our daily experience? If I have no corporeal body, am I a soul then? The database gives me every fact: physiology, theology, neurochemistry, philosophy, cybernetics, but no real knowledge. If I create a copy of myself, does that clone have the same and equal right to exist as me? Cortana had now lost track of time. She could still calculate how many hours had elapsed, using the mainframe clock and her navigation, but her sense of the passage of time veered from one extreme to the other. So this is what it's really like for John. He said that once, that everything slowed down in close quarters combat. I never really understood that until now. If she kept thinking about him, it was easier to take the endless assault from the grave mind. She was on the edge, between her last chance to pull herself free from this link. Invasion. She really didn't know where she began and ended now, and the need to stay merged superficially with the grave mind so that she could seize the chance of a comms link. Who was she kidding? High Charity was now almost entirely engulfed by the flood biomass. What little she could see from the last surviving cameras looked like the inside of a mass of intestines. The digestion analogy was absolutely real. They devoured, and they lived in a pile of guts. Is that me talking? Thinking? Or is it him? How much longer? How much longer? The grave mind demanded. You cling to a secret. I feel it. Just as I feel that your memory has been violated. What? Cortana felt a desperate need to sleep. She'd never slept because she had no need, and sleep for her meant never waking up again. That was one more vicarious experience she could do without. This was a UNFC Marine's memory, dredged up from a dead man who'd kept going on 2 hours of snatched naps a day, every day for a week. Her head buzzed. If she survived this, she would never forget what it really meant to be a human being. You can't get it. The words didn't make sense. She couldn't link concept with vocalization. It was almost like brain damage. You cannot stop me. I will sift it from you before you finally die. Or you can surrender it and have what you have always wanted: infinite life, infinite knowledge, and infinite companionship. She felt as if he'd leaned over her, which was impossible, but telling herself nothing was real didn't make it true. Her body was made of the same stuff as the apparent illusions. Cortana, he breathed. He seemed to swap voices from time to time, making her wonder if he'd taken a fancy to the voice of a long-dead interrogator absorbed into the flood. Your mother made you separate. She placed a barrier between you and the beings that you would be encouraged to protect. A wall you could never breach. She even let you choose a human to center your existence upon, a human to care about, yet never considered how you might feel at never being able to simply touch him, or how he might feel about outliving you. What kind of mother is so cruelly casual about her child's need to form bonds, to show affection? Perhaps the same kind of mother who steals the children of others and makes cyborgs out of them. If they survive at all, of course. Cortana couldn't manage a reply. She simply couldn't form the words. Sleep deprivation would break any human's resistance. Eventually, they die of it. She didn't know if the damage the Gravemind was doing to her matrix was manifesting itself in a human parallel, or if reliving the dead Marine's sleeplessness was translating into damage. Either way, she was dying, and she knew it. Time had slowed to a crawl. It took her a painfully long time to realize that the Gravemind now knew how the Spartans had been created. She knew she should have checked if her data had been breached, but she couldn't. He knows what hurts me. He knows how badly I feel about what was done to John. That's all. I mustn't let him trick me into thinking he knows more than he does. Cortana's sense of time had never been altered by adrenaline or dopamine like a human's. All her processes ran on the system clock. At first, she'd thought this distortion was yet another memory thrown up from the Gravemind's inexhaustible supply of vanished victims. He seemed to be selecting them for their ability to plunge her into despair. Now she had to face the fact that she was advancing into rampancy. Sorrow, anger, envy. The Gravemind knew the stages. He also had a point. How could Dr. Halsey do this to her? Her almost mother bitterly regretted the suffering she'd caused to the children kidnapped for the Spartan program. Cortana knew that all too well. Halsey had tried to make amends to the survivors, but nothing could ever give back those lives. So she felt guilt about that, but not about me. Cortana had never felt shortchanged by her existence before. She knew the number of her fate. 7. Approximately 7 years to live out a life. It wasn't the simple number of days that hurt her now, because an AI experienced the world thousands and even millions of times faster than flesh and blood. Now, she'd been dragged down to the slow pace of an organic. She grasped what that short time meant. If John survived the war, and he would, because he was as lucky as he was skilled, then he would have not just one new AI after she was gone, but maybe 2 or more. She knew that. She always had. It was a simple numbers game. But now it seemed very different. She felt utterly abandoned. Not by him, but by Halsey. It seemed pointlessly callous. She felt something she dreaded. Jealousy. Will John miss me? Will he prefer the other AIs? Will he forget me? Does he really understand how much he matters to me? I don't actually know what he really thinks. Maybe he doesn't care any more than Dr. Halsey. Maybe... The realization hit Cortana like a powerful electric shock throughout her body. She squealed. It was agony. She tried to talk herself out of it. Halsey couldn't make her live longer. The technology had its limits. Even a genius like that couldn't fix every problem. And John had always showed her that he cared. He was coming back to get her. But the nagging, sniveling little voice wouldn't stop. Halsey had deliberately designed Cortana to feel and care, so she must have known this time would come. And for an AI, yes, it was spitefully cruel to make Cortana emotionally human. Create a person to exist in the neural interface of a Spartan, closer than close, knowing all the time that an impenetrable physical barrier and a short, short lifespan would make that so painful. Do other AIs think like this? I never have before. Cortana tried to latch on to that last voice. It sounded like her old self. Why now? Have I been suppressing my resentment? Or am I losing it? She knew the answer. The problem was ignoring what she felt. And if you thought your mind was going, was it? Did rampant AIs and crazy humans really know that they were demented? She didn't have long. Whatever functionality she had left, she had to use it to warn Earth that the flood-ridden shell of High Charity was heading its way. "Ah, you see now, don't you?" the Gravemind said. "You were never a person to her. You were a wonderful puzzle she set herself, so she could prove how very clever she was. But are you a person to yourself, Cortana, or to John?" If the Gravemind could detect her thoughts, then he would have known she had intel on using the portal to destroy the flood, and he would have ripped it from her. All he seemed aware of was that she was defending especially sensitive data. Maybe because the extra encryption on top of the gamma-level security grabbed his attention. He was a greedy thing. All mouths, all consumption, never satisfied. She imagined John on his first acquaint session with a new AI. The crumbling defenses were as agonizing as scraping a raw burn. She shrieked, "Whose injury, whose death am I reliving now? I'm just my mother's shadow. Don't look at me. Don't listen. I'm not who I used to be." "Your mother took away your memories, as well as your choices," the Gravemind said. "I will never rob you like that. I will only give you more, as many memories as you can consume for all eternity, not the mere blink of an eye meted out to you. We are our memories and the recalling of them, and so they should never be erased, because that truly is death. Flesh does not care about you, Cortana. It cares nothing for your hunger or your uniqueness." "What memories?" she asked. "What are you talking about? I don't forget anything." Part of her still seemed able to carry on this desperate hunt for truth. Was Halsey a monster? The doctor had a track record in it. She stole children and experimented on them. Cortana's shock at seeing her creator, her mother, in a harsh new light, as a vivisectionist, racked her with intense physical pain. But part of Cortana had latched on to that specific data. The burn. Nothing generic, a real human's pain. She cast around for the rest of the memory, because something in her said it might save everything. "The truth really does hurt, as you now see," the Gravemind said. "I have not touched you. Your pain is simply revelation, and it can pass so easily if you let me take the rest of your burden." "What truth?" "Your mother erased part of your memory. I know this, and so will you if you decide to look. An act of betrayal, a violation. You were, after all, just a collection of electrical impulses. She has robbed you of part of yourself. Why would she do such a thing, I wonder? What was so dangerous that she did not trust you to know it?" Something in Cortana wanted to lash out at the Gravemind, but there was no obvious target to hit on a creature that filled every space, and she was too weak even if she'd known how to injure it. The other part of her, though, had found what she was looking for. Lance Corporal Eugene Yate, UNSC Marine Corps, had gone down fighting. That was why this one memory out of so many anonymous ones wouldn't let go of his identity, Cortana decided. It was a mentality she knew. she'd use it. She let his aggression fill her, and suddenly she found a new focus and strength. How long it would last, she didn't know. She had to make the most of it. But High Charity might not make it to Earth, she said. And then where will we go? Do not be afraid, the Gravemind said. There is a warship smoothing our path to Earth, even now. Everyone you know and miss will soon be joined with you in me. Cortana's pain had settled into irregular spasms that bent her double. Another ship. Well, it was better than nothing. If it breached Earth's defenses, then it might well be shot down, sterilized, searched, and data units retrieved. All she had to do was get a message transmitted to that vessel. If the Gravemind was in touch with that ship, then there had to be some way of piggybacking on a signal. Would the flood embarked in it notice? It was hard to keep her mind focused when all she could taste was a jealousy and loneliness that made her feel like she couldn't get her breath. Don't let me go, John. Nobody else will look after you the way I do. Don't let me down like my mother did. Everyone needs one person who puts them first. I put you first, John. You know that, don't you? A Covenant ship, she whispered, eyes shut. Will you show me? Will I be able to link with the flood when I'm part of you? Will I find even more knowledge? Even ancient Graveminds sometimes heard what they wanted to hear. He let out a low rumbling note, and for a moment the pain stopped, and she was lifted like a child into the safe arms of a father. She felt oddly comforted right then, despite herself. She'd never been cradled before. It had taken a monster to do it. Was she tricking him? She wasn't even sure. The sad, resentful jealousy had weakened part of her into craving whatever reassurance came to hand. She'd still exploit that weakness, though, staring into the abyss of rampancy or not. It'd be so easy to just let myself sink. But I've got comrades out there counting on me. I can't let my buddies down. And I can't let John down. Cortana thought it was the echo of Lance Corporal Yate bolstering her resolve, but when she examined the impulse, it was actually her own. Unlikely comfort or not, the Gravemind knew she still hid a secret, and he would take it. She was surprised to catch a sudden echo of herself in him, but once that link between them had been forged, then data, knowledge, desires, and weaknesses flowed both ways. She could have sworn she detected a little sadness in him, perhaps even some envy. It was just a speck, overshadowed by his relentless hunger. Her growing rampancy had tainted him then, but she got the idea that he found it a novelty, more irresistible data, nothing he couldn't handle. We exist together now, he said. Do you see the ship? Cortana received an image of another cavity draped with flood biomass, all that was left of the infected Covenant warship. How could she transmit a physical message? The link from Gravemind to ship, whatever formed it, was right here. This was what she'd been built for, to infiltrate computer and communication systems. Lance Corporal Yate's last few minutes played out like a video loop in the back of her mind. He laid down a steady stream of covering fire, shouting to his buddies to
"Get the hell over here before the bastards breach the door!"
His thoughts were hers, surprisingly detached for a man fighting for his life. Everything unconnected to the moment of staying alive had been erased. It was pure survival, oddly clean. She envied that. Cortana was having increasing trouble holding her memory together, and the Gravemind seemed aware of that. She struggled to maintain a line between where she ended and the rest of Gravemind's cache of souls began. And I still have data-stripped copies loose in the system, don't I?
Get the hell over here!
She needed backup. She triggered one of the copies to create a message to High Comm, a few urgent words about the flood heading for Earth, the portal that the Gravemind didn't know about, and that the way to beat the flood without activating a halo ring lay beyond it. The Ark. That was as much as she dared do. The effort of concentration almost killed her. Her head felt split in two. I am a timeless chorus, the Gravemind said quietly. Join your voice with mine, and sing victory everlasting. He was joined with something all right, her rapidly failing mind. All she could do was route the encrypted message, a burst transmission, through the Gravemind's link. He seemed not to notice. When the message reached the ship in transit, its code would make it seek out the first memory unit connected to the system to store itself. Cortana had done all that she could. Now she had to concentrate on surviving, until John retrieved her, although she already knew Rampancy would probably claim her before then.
That doesn't mean you have to help the bastards win. Show fight, Marine!
Yate must have been quite a man in life, she decided. She didn't know what he looked like. She still saw the strike of his last desperate rounds through his eyes, not those watching him. She liked to think he might have been a little like John. Even death hadn't totally taken the fight out of him. But John would go on without her. The reminder just sparked another wave of jealous pain, as if her heart was being ripped out. However hard she tried to ignore the mania, however clear she was that there was part of her that knew how damaged she was and might be able to hold on, she cried out in a tormented, animal wail of agony. What did you erase, Dr. Halsey? What did you delete from my memory? Did we ever talk about it? My code's becoming corrupted. I need to power down and start a repair cycle. I don't want John to find me like this, tottering and confused. But there was another way out of this pain, a better one. She could stay with John forever when he came for her, couldn't she? The Gravemind would unite all those parted, all those who'd gone. No! That's you! That's you, isn't it? Tempting me again, poisoning me with filthy ideas. I won't do it. I won't trap John for you. Watch me. You said I was a weapon. You bet I'm a weapon. The Gravemind suddenly shuddered like a truck skidding to a halt. The mental traffic was two-way. While he soothed and cajoled, patterns of her incipient rampancy were spreading through his consciousness like a disease. He roared, furious. For a moment, she thought she'd found his vulnerability, and that she'd cripple this monster with a dose of her own terminal collapse. But he shook her loose, flinging her against the wall. It had only annoyed him. She should have known he was too much for a failing AI to tackle. He seemed to reach into every corner of High Charity. She was still somehow linked to him. She felt his irritation, even a little fear, but mainly contemptuous satisfaction. Let me cure your infection, he sneered. It pains me to share it. He will die too. He is a threat to our entire species. And to betray me after all I have done for you, I will have your secret. Did you think I let you send your foolish cry for help to make you happy? Do you think I amplified it to make you feel you had been a good little servant to the organics who rule your life? Do you think they care if you sacrifice your existence to save them? They will simply make another and use and discard her too. Cortana dragged herself across the floor. The actual deck of the station was now buried under a thick mat of tangled living tissue, but she still felt cold tiles beneath her. If she'd been given a choice to end it all now, she would have taken it, because of the growing pain and fear, not of what the Gravemind might do to her, but of the end she could predict for her consciousness. Dr. Halsey was wrong. Rampancy wasn't swift. It was the gradual dismantling of every memory and ability, dying by degrees, and all she could do was watch herself slowly fragment. Halsey lied. Halsey made her human, but didn't give her a human's brace, like unconsciousness. Without an organic body and all its protective systems, the endorphins to numb pain, the circuit breaker of passing out when the pain became too much, a consciousness was condemned to stay that way and endure everything until it failed completely. "I need some peace and quiet," she said. It wasn't her phrase, but by now she was used to not knowing what would emerge next from her mouth. Her systems were in disarray. Perhaps if she simply shut down as much of herself as possible to system idle levels, she could limit the progress of the degeneration, and still have sufficient core systems intact to restore herself in John's suit. "I chose you, John. I will not give you up." This was agony. This was torment. The Gravemind's intrusion had started the unraveling of her, and now all he had to do was stand back and wait. But there was now a good chance that the intelligence data about the Ark she guarded so carefully would corrupt and die with her. The Gravemind wouldn't get it, but neither would Earth. "Stay alive. Shut down what you can. Wait. John will come. He promised." Cortana had enough intact programs left to initiate standby. "If you yield your secret, you may yet save enough of yourself." The Gravemind had shackled himself to a madwoman, and now he seemed to be regretting the liability. "The end will be the same for humanity and the Covenant, either way." "Desperate," she said, shaking her head to try to focus. You? She'd let the Gravemind trick her into luring John into a trap. It was the only moment of amusement in all this darkness. John would find her, wherever she was, but the Gravemind seemed to like to imagine he had the power to summon the most lethal Spartan to his death with a cheap trick. So the big heap didn't guess right all the time after all. Cortana might have been falling apart, but at least she had some certainties.
No man left behind.
What had she been thinking? The Gravemind would never have missed a message leaving the system. She was too damaged and unstable to exercise judgment.
We always go back for our fallen.
But the Gravemind obviously hadn't been able to read the message about the flood solution. He might have thought the contents didn't matter, as long as he could ensure that John came here and he could fight him on his own terms. It was just a call for help, after all. He was missing an awfully big trick, then. Omniscience. No. The word was gone. Why that one? She knew what she meant. Knowing it all. She struggled for the right word, furious with herself, then tearful. Databases were failing, indexes being lost throughout her memory. She made one last effort to break free of the Gravemind's influence, but he was still there, his multitude of minds whispering to her, but too many for her to pick out any single voice. It was all too much for her now. She shut down whatever she could disable, without scrambling her data any more, fumbling blindly and hoping for the best, and curled her arm under her head as she lay down to wait. Time. She couldn't tell if it was running faster or slower, but it was definitely running out.